So here we are with Dr. Vicky Katsioloudes. Thank you for a lot for being here. I consider this short interview, don't worry, it will not be harsh, as something which would definitely interest the people who are watching us right now. Since I consider you, from the little I know you, both from my professional and student life here in Cyprus, you are among the people whose the opinion on these issues I follow. And I'm very glad to have you here to discuss some topics that I will put on the table, but feel free to go further and beyond. So I would like to start with asking you to tell our participants a few words about you, your background, your expertise.
Great. Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the chance to talk to the participants of the EMBRACIVE project. My background is in psychology and social organizational psychology. I have done my PhD on human resource leadership development. I have studied in the US and in London, and I have worked in diverse cultural environments for the last 15 years or so. Currently, for the last year or so, I have repatriated in Cyprus, and I am the director of the Masters in Human Resource Management and Organizational Behavior at CIIM. And as part of that role, I'm excited to get the opportunity to develop and devise programs that focus on diversity to ensure that our students who are either currently HR professionals or future HR professionals have the skill set that they need in order to make workplaces a better place.
I have to tell you and confess in order to be fully transparent with you, that Vicky is the director of the HR Master of CIIM, which I attend and I strongly recommend it, especially under her leadership. And you told us that you've been away for about 15 years. I would like to ask you, and it's not irrelevant to our topic, how does it feel to be back in Cyprus after 15 years in all these different worlds, universes of working life, personal life, in general, being in such different and diverse environments? How does it feel here now?
Well, I am still experiencing what we call counterculture shock. Yeah. Having worked essentially abroad, because I really didn't have a lot of work experience in Cyprus, I have to say that it feels familiar, yet it feels different. So coming back after all these years, I have noticed that a lot of the issues around diversity and inclusion are now becoming more and more prominent. People are talking about these issues, people are reflecting on practices. There is a discussion. This wasn't necessarily happening, 10, 15 years ago. And these topics, particularly in London and big cities in the US that I have worked, was something that was discussed a long time ago and still is at the forefront. With a lot of, if you look at the political, social movements that are happening, let's say in the US the last months, you can see how prominent that was. Now, having said that, working in Cyprus, because we are, an island, small island, slightly cut off from the rest of the world, we are now getting exposed to this notion of diversity and assimilating and welcoming people in our country and integrating them, right? Whether it's part of the education, the economy, businesses. So I think it's exciting that we're starting this conversation now.
So why diversity now, you said? Why now? By now I mean in Cyprus, at least I've been living here for almost 7 years now. And it's a discussion which started not more than that, 7, 8, maximum 10 years. not only Cyprus, but also globally. I would like to ask you your opinion, but you told us that in the US or in England or other big economies, diversity was a lot of decades ago an issue of discussion and of applied sciences in the workplace. But let's take Europe or the southern countries of Europe, like Cyprus. Why diversity now? Is it a trend? Is it a need? Is it a fact that we have to embrace?
I think if you consider the wider context, so for example, if you look at the agenda for 2030 for sustainable development as part of the United Nations, that is something that we are pushing and we're committed, a lot of countries, it's a United Nations initiative, to sort of reach sustainable development goals that focus on three dimensions: the social, the economical, and the environmental. So we are starting to get at a point as a planet that in order for sustainable development to occur, we need to consider a lot of different factors. And social inclusion practices, issues of equality are at the forefront. I mean, there's a specific sustainable development goal that focuses on, for example, gender equality. So I think we are realizing that in order to reach to a certain place and be sustainable, we can no longer afford to ignore the fact that we have an ethical responsibility, not only an economical gain, to include people and capitalize on the strengths of people and provide equal opportunities, regardless of background or,
I see. Well, you perfectly described the UN framework and the international strategy regarding sustainable goals, which include diversity as a viable term of viability in the economies, in the societies, etc. I would like to go a bit deeper than the surface and the declarations, because declarations are always declarations. The matter is how we apply them, how we implement and we discover their inner content. Who defines diversity? Who defines a diverse employee? Who defines who is different or diverse?
Now, there are a lot of different definitions, and coming from, if you look at the law, for example, there are different pieces of legislation that will define diversity for the purposes of, ensuring that legal practices are enforced. If you look at, definitions of diversity that are a little bit more encompassive and inclusive, then it could slightly change. But in essence, all of us are diverse. All of us have, a unique genetic makeup, for example, different social, we come from a different social class, different educational background, sexual orientation, religion, belief systems, talents, strengths, style of thinking. So I think we could go on and have endless, definitions of what diversity is. And but in terms of looking at it from, let's say, HR practices, or looking at it from the, let's say, the stage that we are at in terms of businesses in Cyprus, for example, I think the main focus initially is placed on ensuring that you have diversity in terms of gender, in terms of nationality and ethnicity, and in terms of perhaps age, or making sure you provide people with disabilities opportunities. So, even though diversity is really, really, encompasses a lot of different things, I think some efforts now will mostly be focused on ensuring that we have, gender diversity, that we have diversity in terms of nationality and ethnicity, and also in terms of sexual orientation.
You covered already a question that I was about to make later, but in a very compiled and very smooth way. Let's imagine that now we are in a job interview. You are an employer and I'm a candidate.
Okay, let me.
Yes.
Get a little bit.
I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not
Yes.
in the outfit, but let's.
Well, the culture of the organization allows for that, so you're good.
Okay, you got your point. I have had the feeling in the past, fortunately not in CSI, which is a really diverse environment in the essence of the term, not in the surface, that all the times that a guy with a beard, long hair, an earring, was appearing in front of an employer, the employer would perceive him as diverse per se, by principle. When he would see me or she would see me, they would think, this guy must be kind of different or must carry some different values from the people that we have been used to. Because, maybe this outfit in Cyprus is not that common, or I don't know why.
Maybe for the jobs you were interviewing, it wasn't the standard profile of the employee they had. Sometimes we get into those traps. We fall into those traps.
So, yes, of course, that's a big issue. So, what would you suggest to employers who have a goodwill to change in this perception? They see a person with a hijab, they see a person with long hair, they see a person with tattoos, they see a person who has been injured seriously. What would be your first advice to an employer who has not an extended experience in HR, in diversity, he does not know even the term, he has never heard of that. And it's an SME, for example, a small company. What would you suggest?
The first thing I would suggest is taking a step back and reminding yourself, why did you call that person for an interview in the first place? Something made you send them an email, give them a call, for them to come for the interview process, which means that at least on paper, right, they had the required knowledge, skills, and abilities at a first glance to make the cut, to come for an interview. So I think it's important to take a step back and remind ourselves of that. So we can focus on how the knowledge, skills, and abilities of this person could contribute to our organization. Now, regarding how we react to how certain people talk, look, what vibe we get, or what we perceive them to be in terms of age or sexual orientation or any other assumptions that we make. One thing that helps is to, if possible, to conduct the interviews as part of having a diverse interview panel. So you're conducting the interview, let's say, with other people in the organization. That way you can you use that as a check and balance. So I think that's a practical tip, something that I think everybody has the ability to implement.
Let's go now in the workplace, which is also the big topic of EMBRACIVE project. If you should rate Cyprus from 0 to 10 regarding embracing diversity in the workplace, where would you put it and why?
Okay, I'm not very comfortable with rating, but I'll give you an indication, and then you sort of assess it for yourselves.
Here, students, you can do whatever you want with your essays and your assignments, since rating is not.
No, I can rate the assignments. I'm talking about rating Cyprus. But an indication is that sort of the latest statistics in terms of where Cyprus is, for example, in terms of gender diversity.
Very diplomatic.
They're about almost 10%, a little bit below 10% board members are women in Cyprus, and about 17.5% of executives are women. So, and think about how the labor market, you have almost equal representation of men and women in the labor market, and you have women graduating at a higher rate from higher education institutions. They're absorbed at a slower rate from the work market, and then the numbers in leadership positions reflect in a way where we're at.
There's a proportion.
Yes, because if you consider that you have an organization, for example, that's a very quick check. And I encourage all of the participants in this workshop to do that quick check. Think about your workplace. How many, for example, are women? How many employees are men? And how does the leadership of the organization look? That's a very quick, it's almost like a rapid test of on diversity. Okay, so if you have, 80% of your employees are women, and you only have 1 or 2% being part of the executive team, being part of the board, what does that say? How much do you embrace diversity?
I have to take the role of the devil's advocate and put on the table the counter discussion. I don't believe in it, but that's a counter argument that we hear a lot around. If a woman doesn't have the skills of a man, why should we promote a woman? Why should we hire a woman in order to balance the gender equality in an organization? I know it sounds very childish, but this is a mainstream counter argument against what you say.
Nobody, and I'm glad you're giving me the chance to clarify. We're not talking about promoting someone to check a box. We're not talking about that at all. One of the premises of HR is that primary role is to be able to recruit people, select people, and make sure that you have the right people in the right positions so you can drive individual and organizational performance, right? So we're not talking about doing favors here. We're not talking about promoting someone because they're a woman or because they come from a different background and we need to check the box. We're talking about ensuring that from the moment those people are in the organization, they get equal access to training opportunities. They get fair performance reviews. They get equal access to promotions, to mentoring programs. You allow for workplace flexibility that enables those people to grow in the organization. And then when you are reviewing for promotions, well, in a way, you need to ensure if you have done all of those things, then of course you will have women in the selection process. Of course they will be in the pipeline because you have done all of those things before. So we're not talking, under no circumstances, giving women a role, let's say, or anybody else for that matter, just to check the box. Now, what happens when you have, let's say, a decision to make and you have two candidates for a promotion, one of them is a woman, one of them is a man, and all other factors being equal, both of them can be successful in the role, then at that point, I think you need to make a strategic decision in terms of, okay, well, if I'm really not having a leadership team that's represented, maybe if all things are equal, then at this point, having a woman on the board, for example, would then create other opportunities. You have other people identifying with that person, and that is a strategic decision. But we're talking about people who have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job, to be successful. We're not negotiating that. Providing that you have given opportunities, equal opportunities throughout the employee life cycle.
Thank you for clarifying this, and because it's the base of addressing and facing and confronting a popularist argument which says more women in politics, more women, more young people in I don't know where. So this qualitative, this exclusively qualitative term in matters of HR or employing. This is always what's heard more and more and more. But is it enough?
It's providing, making sure that you provide opportunities and access. And I'll go back a little bit. You know, it's interesting here, you have the term diversity, right? Yeah. And then over there you have the term inclusion. So diversity, and it's a metaphor that I like to use. Diversity is about being invited to the party. Inclusion is about being asked to dance. Okay. So diversity, there are certain HR practices that you need to make sure that you are reaching out talent pools that are diverse enough so you attract candidates to apply in your organization in the first place, right? And then ensuring that as part of that recruitment and selection process, you have fair and transparent processes that will enable you to increase diversity in your organization. Not for the sake of diversity, because you have talented people that could contribute to your organization. And then once they're on board, those people need to be asked to dance. They need to feel that they're in a safe environment where they are not marginalized, where they get chances to contribute in decision making, where their voices are heard, and they feel that they're productive. They have equal access to promotions, to training and development, and they don't feel marginalized because they look, sound different, because they have, they're in a same-sex relationship. All of those things are part of, that's why diversity, and you'll see a few years ago we were talking about diversity, now we talk about diversity and inclusion, because it goes hand in hand.
Because the dance has started?
Well, the party has started. So it's important, organizations realize that we can no longer represent one segment of the population. We can no longer represent one, segment of society. We live in more and more diverse societies. And Cyprus, is becoming more and more diverse. We have a very significant...
It was.
Well, it's becoming even more. Now we have, for example, a very significant, substantial percentage of people from Russia who work and live in Cyprus. So, that's changing the landscape. We have now second generation that is now attending schools, and they will graduate from, Cyprus education institutions. They will say, when you ask them, where are you from? They will say Cyprus. And at this point, you're going to have people who submit an application that their name sounds different, is different. And then they show up, and you need to, at that point, you need to ensure that you're giving those people fair access.
You remind me of a funny but in parallel tragic story from my military service. We had a guy, I was a recruiter in the army, and we had a friend of ours, a guy there, who was from Nigeria, and he was black. When he came, he was newer than me, a newbie, let's say. When he came to the campus, the captain there, who was in charge, asked him where you are from. Maybe he had never heard of Adeto Kubo or I don't know, whoever else. And he told him, I'm from Greece. And he asked me, as I was a lawyer or something, is he joking or something? I tell him, no, he is from Greece. And he tells him, where did you study? In England? No, in ASOE, the Industrial School of Athens.
I was in Kypseli.
I'm very happy also to have some military men today in our workshop, or at least in our of our sessions. This shows something that I think that the dance has started, apart from the party.
And it's okay, all of us, we're human beings. We are, our brain, to process information, will categorize, will put people information in categories. And all of us have, make assumptions or have bias or prejudice. That's
humane,
it is something that, it's part of our nature. That doesn't mean that we cannot be aware of that, right? And trying to minimize that and use some mechanisms that can help us and ensure that we are practicing fair HR practices. And I emphasize HR because everybody's responsible for diversity and inclusion. Each and every one of us has responsibility. When we talk about the workplace, however, I do believe that the role of leadership is fundamental in promoting a diverse and inclusive environment. And HR not only needs to be have a very prominent role in this, in sort of drafting procedures, ensuring that they're implemented, ensuring that these practices are implemented in a fair and transparent way, ensuring that when they have complaints about discrimination, how are those treated, for example? How are they handled? So HR has a very important role, and also the managers, because the employees will look up to the managers, will look up to leadership. They will look at cues, and they will look not only at what's been written, right? So if these values are just written but they're not practiced, you know right away. You know at the first time when you're up for a promotion, you know.
I remember Dimitris Hatsofoglou, I had my interview for CSI at this very table here, and he told me, "You see all this?" I told him, "Yes," enthusiastically. He told me, "Forget it. We will speak about this, but in reality." What you say about leadership, I consider it very very important.
And also, every single employee, how do we react when we hear a racist or sexist joke? How do we respond when we feel that certain colleagues don't have access to the same opportunities? Or do we exclude people from certain social functions or from conversations because we feel uncomfortable? And it's okay. Many times what's different causes fear. And when we feel that we don't know how to necessarily, handle that, we're scared of of someone that looks different, that thinks different, that, and sometimes mere exposure. So having the opportunity to be exposed to people who are different, who are diverse, helps.
What's your feeling about the leaders of businesses in Cyprus regarding diversity? I mean, do you feel that I generalize now, but we are obliged to do so in order to have to get the picture of this situation here. But do you feel that there are at least cells or there are some cores who are able at this moment to take things from A and go further?
I think there is a push, and having now multi-generational workforce, I think accelerates that. It helps with that, because you have, for example, the millennials who are really, there are, on general terms, right? Because I don't like to, everybody is different in that way. But there is some indication that millennials want to work for organizations that have a purpose, that make an impact, and they expect that their employers, that their workplaces will embrace diversity and inclusion. So, in a way,
and we have youngsters rejecting jobs because of that.
Exactly.
More and more,
Exactly.
even if they don't have an alternative.
Exactly. So you will see that sort of pushes, and that's why I don't think business leaders can afford anymore not to see that the value of diversity and inclusion, and of course the hard work it takes. Because again, it's not about checking the boxes, and I really want to emphasize that. It's about encouraging and embracing an organizational culture of diversity and inclusion. So I think the fact that we're having this conversation now is an indicator that things are moving forward. So I think this is going to continue to happen. There are a lot of sort of forces that are pushing for this. So I think the fact that we are having these conversations is an indication that we are moving in the right direction.
Let's say already here the training session that our attendees attend right now will be after the elections here. But let's imagine you are a candidate and you are elected in the parliament.
This is really difficult for me. Yes, okay. I was never interested in politics, but let me try.
No, with the HR party. Okay.
Okay.
If you had the power to go in institutions which stipulate the situation regarding diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Let's say if you were also a Minister of Labor or a consultant to the Minister of Labor, what would be the first two or three things that you would prioritize immediately to be done in order to push things forward in long-term period?
I think first of all, I would ask organizations to take a quick snapshot of their the workforce.
The rapid test you were
A snapshot of, okay, how many people do I employ? What are the backgrounds of these people? And not only in terms of nationality or ethnicity, but also you'll see companies, for example, that keep recruiting people that graduate from the same universities. They almost look the same, they sound the same, because they have been, reproduced. Exactly, that type of approach. So I would first ask organizations to take a snapshot of the current, of their workforce. I think that gives you an indication where you're at. Then I would ask them to check whether if they have procedures, practices that are written down as part of diversity, in terms of diversity and how to create an inclusive, let's say, workplace. So I would ask them to sort of assess the current HR practices, their procedures, and see whether those are written down or not, and if they are written down, whether they are being implemented and essentially, not enforced, but they don't only talk the talk, they walk the walk. Yeah, I think that's the way they say it. But you sort of practice what you preach, so you don't only have it in writing, but those practices are implemented and sort of you live by those. And then I would make sure that the conversation of diversity and inclusion is part of an everyday conversation. It's not, 1 week in May or 1 month in a year. Yes, even though there's nothing wrong with that, I think, to celebrate and have dedicated days. But I think it should be something that sort of diffuses. It's part of every decision that we make, whether that's with what supplier to collaborate, whether it's with hiring practices, with promotion practices. And that's why, as part of the CIIM program, for example, we wanted to ensure that issues of diversity and inclusion are discussed in every aspect of the HR courses that are being taught, and not only as part of our managing diversity workshop that we have. So
you reminded me of a great episode of Office, if you know it.
I have to watch Office. I'm resisting, but I have to. I've watched snippets.
Especially for your profession.
The British or the American?
I like the American more than the English.
Okay.
And there is the Diversity Day that it reminded me that, because there is Steve Carell, the director there. Yes. And he gets all the employers who come from different ethnicities, different, let's say, origins and stuff. And he puts stickers on their front, writing Italian, Black, Chinese. He considers this to be a celebration of diversity. It's a very, of course, a satiric way to, to condemn this, but this segmented and scattered practices of just celebrating or just trying or just giving slogans.
That doesn't mean anything if it's not really embedded. That doesn't mean anything if you have an employee who comes to you, let's say as an HR or their manager, and says, look, I need particular times of the day, I need a few minutes so I can pray. right? And then your reaction is something that
we don't pray at work.
It's like, yeah, I don't think we can do that.
Yeah.
How does that, are you trying to create an inclusive work environment? How are people responding? Now, I'll give you a very small example, and I think that's why I think it's what we call about everyday practices and how leadership can really play a role in this. And each of us as employees, a very common thing, you have, a big life-changing event that you share with your colleagues. Whether you got married and you put the photo of your wedding day in a visible place, or you have a newborn and you show the photo. Well, let's take a step back. Would somebody that's in a same-sex relationship feel as comfortable putting a photo of their partner up?
This doesn't mean that the person who puts the photo of his wedding has to take it down.
No. What I'm saying is that when you're part of the majority, whatever that majority is, that comes with certain privileges that we are not necessarily aware of. When you don't have those privileges, the group that doesn't have those privileges is painfully aware of the opportunities that other people get. So for example, and that's why I'm using these very sort of things we wouldn't even consider necessarily.
It's everyday life, huh?
It's everyday life. And you say, oh, I got pissed today with my husband, right? That comes out from a woman. Nobody's gonna turn twice. Nobody's gonna even consider. But you have somebody who's in a same-sex relationship. Do they feel comfortable saying, oh, I just had a fight with my girlfriend today. I'm not feeling up to project. How does that then play out in the workplace? Is that person being invited for after-work drinks? Are they being gossiped behind their backs, right?
Since we have Greek-speaking audience right now, I would say that especially in the Greek language, this is even harsher because in English there are the neutral or there is a neutrality in the pronouns, in the vocabulary sometimes. But in some languages, like the Greek one, if a woman says my girlfriend, it's not the girlfriend, as it doesn't have the same feeling as in, or the same sense exactly. Yeah, connotation. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So it's even harder in some contexts.
So again, how do we practice? How do we encourage employees to bring their whole selves to work, to feel safe, to feel that they can be productive, contribute to the organization regardless of their age, their gender, their nationality, their sexual orientation, their social class. So I think that's a bet that all of us are making, and I think we're having these conversations, and we're moving towards, hopefully, more diverse and inclusive workplaces. And I'm hoping, that's why I think education has the power to transform minds and transform practices. So I'm hoping, as part of the HR program, as part of this training that participants are attending now, that you can take back one thing, one little thing. Sometimes big changes, they can be overwhelming, but if there's one practice, one change you can make, try and do that. And I think education has the power to do that, because each and every one of us works somewhere. Maybe you're in a leadership position and you have more power to do things and implement things. Maybe you can be aware of what's going on, and when the opportunity comes and you're part of an interview panel, you say, okay, hold on, let's review these CVs again, trying to eliminate whatever personal assumption or biases may be at play. Or asking a colleague that looks different or that has a different religion, be curious, learn about them. Learn about where they come from. So I think there is a lot of power in education and how we can transform workplaces to make them more diverse and inclusive. And I think I'm going to conclude with the fact that it's not only about what we are legally required to do. The legal aspect, the laws, and you know that much better than I do, the laws of a given country are a reflection of where they are in terms of their societal, progress. But at the same time, nobody nobody is banning you from implementing things above the law, beyond the law. So the law may require X, Y, and Z. There's nothing that says as a company you cannot offer more. You cannot do more.
Yeah, it's what we call in Roman law in bonum partem. It means you can do better.
You can do better.
From the law.
Yeah.
It's
not only in business case, it's also, and I think it's important to know that it's also an ethical matter, right? It's not only about business, it's about an ethical dimension to this topic.
Especially for Cyprus and for other countries of the Mediterranean Sea, like Greece, that I know well. This issue of legislation, I have to disagree partially with you, that it's a reflection of the society, because we have also the European acquis. Some things come in a centralized way, and countries have to ratify, for example, a convention or a directive or
Which
something.
I think pushes us forward, right?
Pushes us forwards sometimes.
Sometimes,
I mean,
okay.
I feel that you have to do a lot of things to really make things work, and beyond just saying that I have ratified the convention or so.
Well, exactly what we said. It's not only about writing things and having procedures, it's about, and values, it's about how you implement those, how you
realize things.
Yes, how you embrace them and how you live them through everyday workplace practices.
The final word is yours, and I would like you to turn to the camera and address your final words to our participants with under this point. The day after this training, they go back to their work or their university or wherever their social place is. What can they do the next morning after this training to get closer to diversity and the dance inclusion?
So I think the one thing you can certainly do, it's once you know, you cannot not know. So the fact that at this point you have gained some knowledge, you have increased your awareness about issues of diversity and inclusion, I think you have the responsibility to talk about these issues with your colleagues, to talk about these issues with your manager, to try and find opportunities to implement some of the things that you will learn. And if nothing else, you can be what we call an ally in the workplace. So you can be a person who understands what somebody from a minority group may be dealing with, and to be somebody who supports and advocates for equal opportunities within the workplace. So I think that would be my final message.
I will keep this nice work, alliances which ends up in solidarity, again, social solidarity. It was Dr. Vicky Katsioloudes, Director of the HR Master of CIAM. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure. And I hope the training is a big success.
And I guess that the participants can find you on
Yes, they can search on LinkedIn and on the CIIM website. You can find my contact details, and if you want to have a chat about diversity and inclusion, as you can see, it's something that we enjoy. So it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.